Bonjour people, welcome back to another review. This is going to be a weird one. This time we are looking at the character options Doctor Who, Cyberman and Cyber Controller. Now as you can probably tell, look how far back I'm having to sit because of this. These guys are 12-inch figures. They are massive. They're probably bigger than 12-inch. Like, this is how far I can reach. I can't even reach to them. Yeah, these guys, I have a lot of figures that I've pulled out of storage because I'm looking to move on with a few things. Especially this guy on the right, I have a plan for him. This guy on the left I'm going to keep. But these are massive Doctor Who figures in the vein of Action Man sort of things. Or if, like, character options is equivalent to Hot Toys in a way. They don't obviously hold a candle to Hot Toys, but this is the closest thing I'm ever going to get to something like that. So, we have a Cyberman, and we have a Cyber Controller, alias John Lumick. These two herald from the 2006 episodes Rise of the Cybermen and the Age of Steel. And of course, this is the Russell T Davies era style of Cyberman. Or let's be more accurate, the first Russell T Davies era style Cyberman, and they continued about halfway through into the Stephen Moffat era as well. They debuted with the 10th Doctor, they continued on to the 11th, and then variants came out where the Cybers Industry logo was replaced. Just a grey slab in the middle. And then by the time of Nightmare in Silver, they were largely phased out. The variants keep coming up here and there. I mean, they have actually had a bit of a resurgence with the Chris Chibnall era. This style has come back, again, missing the Cybers Industries logo, because these guys were from a parallel Earth. Let's have a look at the Cyberman first. I don't know how I'm going to have to stand up when we get to articulation. This is ridiculous. Right. We'll try and zoom in as close as we can to this bad boy. So as we can see, he is painted in a very beautiful silver colour. And yeah, I mean, it's a solid Cyberman design. It's not my favourite. For the time, it's solid. So I'm just panning up and down here. We are just examining his silver for the most part. But you can see at the ends of the arms and indeed on the legs here, it kind of fades into this smoky black, like burnt metal sort of thing, as if exhaust fumes have been coming out of it, so the metal is charred. That's a really nice effect. There's fantastic detailing all over. You can see all these panel lines on the torso. These things here, pretty cool. It's just the little things that you don't think about when it comes to this design. Obviously the Cybers Industries logo on the front. The head is sculpted really nicely. There is a body glove that runs the entirety of the figure. You can see hints of it in between all of these silver grey pieces, and then nicely detailed as well. The Cyberman's body glove compared to the Cyber Controller's it's like a dark grey, whilst the Cyber Controllers is more black. So there is actually a colour difference. And I have to say, the Cyber Controllers actually looks nicer. I think it's hard, obviously, to tell because of the light. The Cyberman might be a very slightly darker shade of silver compared to his controller, who we'll just bring forth and we'll have a look at now. It could just be the lighting of this room. Probably in the camera they don't look any different whatsoever. But this controller here, if we zoom in on his head, you can see it's completely different. Well, it's not completely different, but it's very different. His faceplate is actually definitely a darker shade of silver. It's more like a gunmetal grey sort of thing. But obviously the big difference with the Cyber Controller is he's got his brain exposed and he's got blue eyes. For this reason, I prefer the Cyberman. I've never been a fan of the Cyber Controller, really, as a design. In the classic series, there were two Cyber Controllers. In fact, they were meant to be the same controller, but they had stark different designs to one another. being products of the 60s and the 80s respectively, but they all had big like cone heads. This guy opts for the brain, and this was a similar thing that the Cyber Leader started to take on. The Cyber Leader obviously being the Cyberman classically with the black handlebars, but there was a variant toward the late Russell era and the early Moffat era where they would basically take the controller design but paint the handlebars black, paint the faceplate black as well, and there you had like a Cyber Leader or a Cyber Prince or a Cyber Lord or whatever it was called. It's just a leader. But the controller here, yeah, I mean, the brain, you're difficult to tell because of how far away we are, but you can see it's white with red veins all over. So it's, you know, sculpted and painted really nicely. The blue eyes, it's a bit of a pity that they aren't LEDs. They're just painted, but imagine if that could light up. That would be very cool. The controller also has these ports all over his upper torso, and they were connections for his throne. He remembered in the episodes that John Lumick was on life support, so that's the idea behind this. Toward the end of the episode, he tears himself out of that chair and then he goes on a rampage. So that's what those are. Another big difference between these two figures, if we look at the controller's hands, one is open, like the right hand specifically, I'm meaning. That's the Cyberman there. You can see it's more closed. This one is more open. It's more in the vein of as if he was holding an invisible gun. But he's not. I don't know why they chose to do the difference. There's no rhyme or reason. I don't think they came with accessories. I mean, I've had these guys probably since 2006. So, yeah, I don't know. We've said about the back, I don't mean the back, I mean the black body glove, and that looks nicer. I just wish, and they probably have these differences to set these figures apart so that they have a justifiable reason to sell them, but I just wish that the Cyberman on the left had his body glove, because I think that would make him look 1,000 times better. As it is, I sort of think the paintwork on the controller is better, but I like this guy more because I've never been a fan of the exposed brain of that guy. You can see on the controller as well that the paint job is so much better that you can see that we talked about how there's this black smoky fade effect, like this charred effect that runs on this guy, and it runs on this guy as well. You can see it more prevalently in the shoulders as well. I believe it is on him, but it's harder to see. He's a bit more smudged. This guy, it's very much more clear. Now I'm going to stand up and attempt to show you articulation. What we have then, the Cyberman and the Cyber Controller, they've both got the exact same articulation. They can turn their heads 360 degrees. They can... Well, they can't really look down. I mean, they can look down that far, but it's like an Action Man figure. So it's a bit of a springy head. So he can't stay looking down and he can't stay looking up. In fact, he can't look up at all. He's just rigid like that. Again, like this kind of gets in the way. It's just the design of the suit. What are you going to do? Again, it's not my favourite Cyberman design. My favourite is actually the 80s style, from Earthshock to... I'm going to include Silver Nemesis in that, even though they are slightly different, but the 80s version. So, with the arms, you can move them up that far, but they won't stay up. You can move them back that far, but they won't stay back. And this is simply because of the body glove. It gets in the way of a lot of the articulation, and of course the general design of the armour itself will hinder a lot of that articulation. But Action Man style figures, you know, if they were unrestricted, they could have a decent, well, a spectacular range of articulation. But this body glove, and I think this is the same thing with a lot of Hot Toys figures as well, it does compromise the range that you can get out of these things. You can bend him at the elbow. This will hold in place, but you do run the risk of crumpling up this glove. That might be part of the reason why the glove on the controller looks better than this one, because I played with this one a whole lot more, but not to the extent that it's damaged in any way or it's loose or anything. The wrists can swivel out that far, and swivel back that far, so there is not 360 degrees of rotation. I believe that again is because of the shape of the cuffs here. At the waist, he can turn slightly that way and that way, but again, he is restricted. This time it is the body glove's fault. But because of the armour, and maybe, yeah, I think it's also just due to the general figure not having this articulation joint. He has nothing at the abs, so he can't do any ab crunches. He can move his hips down like that far, so he's got a bit of a downward bend. He can stick his backside out if you like. He can't exactly limbo or fall back at the waist, the hips, sorry, so he's got only a slight tilt. So to that effect, leg articulation is pretty rubbish. He can't kick out very far, only that far, and he can kick back that far. At the knees, he does have a decent range of motion. I mean, that's fine, but the armour piece, I suppose, is stopping him from going any further. And then at the ankles, he's got a bit of twist there, a bit of up and down motion. He's got no rocker joints, so he's very limited. And the exact same is true for the controller. They're the same figure, they've just got a few aesthetic differences. But yeah, in terms of articulation, it's not very impressive. He is mostly just a statue more than anything else, so he's a good shelf display piece. I'm going to bring in a few more people for a size comparison, and this kind of blew my mind as I was showing this off earlier, so let's get rid of the controller. So we spoke about Action Man earlier. Now, do you remember the X-Robots? This was toward the end of the Action Man run in the 2000s. X-Robots, Toxic Robots, these guys are so cool, and I went on a collecting spree back in the day. It's essentially a similar sort of thing, you know, size comparison rise, they're both the same size. Arguably, I mean, this Cyberman, I'm not sure it has better articulation than the X-Robot. Certainly in terms of head it does, because the X-Robot is just a static thing, but in terms of arms and legs, because the X-Robot is not restricted by anything, it is superior in that respect. But the Cyberman, of course, is superior at dying. Now, to bring in a few Transformers, we're going to go back in time with this. This is Revenge of the Fallen leader Optimus, and, well, he's bigger than a leader class. I mean, this is an old-style leader class. This is a leader class figure that are bigger than modern leader class figures. Like, if I were to bring out Studio Series Grindor, I think Grindor would be like somewhere here. He's massive, isn't he? Which, you know, to this effect, clearly the Cyberman is like a supreme class in terms of size scale for the Transformers. You can see Prime's head isn't even the top of the figure, it's more like his back panels, and they only reach the Cyberman's shoulders. Going back in time a bit more, we have Cybertron Megatron here, and you know, he's the same size as Optimus, so it's just to hammer home the point really of how big this Cyberman is. And yeah, like leader class figures for Transformers didn't really change size back in the day, so yeah, Megatron, he only comes up to the Cyberman's shoulders. So really, if you want to contend with the size of this guy, you've got to bring out a Supreme class figure. I was very tempted to transform my Energon Unicron into robot mode. Quite frankly, I couldn't be bothered. So I got the next best guy out, and here we have Armada Super Optimus Prime. Now this is a size comparison that's a lot more worthy, because we've got one that is the same size as this Cyberman. And it just strikes me how big this guy is. I mean, like, before I started this review, I did the size comparisons off camera to see what would be the best things to compare. And I was flabbergasted because I got it in my head, oh, he's just a leader class figure. No, he's a Supreme class figure. He's so big. Look at this guy. You've got to have a lot of space to have figures for this big. I mean, I've got a different storage solution, but jeez, so big. So there we go then. We have the Cyberman and the Cyber Controller from Character. these are old figures. They look beautiful. I mean, they do. Despite me not particularly liking the design of the controller, I cannot deny he is a sublime-looking figure. Cyberman himself, I think the paint on him suffers a bit more, but I prefer him. Yeah, they're very big. In terms of articulation, they don't possess a lot, so the biggest thing that they can boast are being really beautiful shelf pieces. So if you're a collector for the sake of having a really nice display, they're great. If you're the sort of person that wants really posable action figures to do things like stop motions with, yeah, they're not. They're not going to suffice very well. If you're a kid, I don't know what the likelihood of you breaking them is going to be, or making them really loose in the joints, because they're statues, essentially. So go wild, I suppose. But yeah, it's hard for me to give a recommendation just because it depends on what your tastes are. Again, if you want them for display, absolutely. If you want them for playability, maybe not. Maybe go for something a bit more smaller that is bound to have their articulation. But there we go, 2 Cybermen for the price of 1 review. Thank you everybody so much for stopping by and checking out this video. Like and subscribe if you haven't already, and share it around to help me out. And until the next time, see you all later.